back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We've been talking a lot about Detroit this morning. One thing Detroit isn't necessarily known for is its parks. But if you've spent some time soaking in the sunset at Belle Isle, admiring the apple orchard at Palmer Park, or watching the wildlife and the wildflowers at Rouge Park, then you know Detroit's parks are something to talk about and something to protect.
Robin, that's so right. That's so right. One way the Detroit Parks Coalition is working to do that is through the Adopt a Park program. It is asking groups like block clubs, churches, and nonprofits to become stewards of a city park. Then, as stewards, your group takes on some ownership of the park. You keep it clean and you host events. Here to discuss the magic of Detroit's parks and what it means to adopt one is Sigal Hemy. She's the executive director of the Detroit Parks Coalition. Sigal, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Sigal, before we get into the Adopt a Park program, we wanted to talk about Detroit's parks more broadly. Could you give us an overview of Detroit's park system? How many parks do we have?
There are actually over 300 parks in Detroit. We have a nice mix of neighborhood parks. So think what you would find on your block, swing set, maybe one or two amenities that you could walk to, and regional parks, which, like you mentioned, Palmer Park, Rouge Park, more destinations, much larger, way more stuff to do, much more actively programmed.
300 parks, over 300. I had no idea. And that's, of course, because you're not going actively through all the neighborhoods where these parks would exist, but that's amazing.
But now we're going to be doing that.
The Metro's hitting the road, the parks tour with the Detroit Park Coalition.
You guys are welcome anytime.
Oh yeah, I love this. So what are some of the unique offerings at Detroit Parks? I think the one thing I love about Detroit Parks when you are traveling through the city is how unique some of them are to that community. So can you talk a little bit about some of those offerings?
Yeah, we always say that each park kind of has its own flavor and is always reflective of its community and of its neighborhood. But actually, even regionally, there are some gems in Detroit. So Palmer Park has the largest old-growth forest in the entire Southeast Michigan region, even outside the city. Rouge Park, which you guys mentioned earlier, is the largest urban park in the entire state of Michigan.
Who knew?
Like, look, shoulders, like, wow.
And really, all our parks just have so much culture, so much community, so much livelihood. It's a joy to be with them.
And the cool thing, too, Rouge Park, like you said, it's one of those you said the largest
urban park in the state.
And it doesn't feel that way. I grew up near Rouge Park, and it just honestly, it feels like the neighborhood park, but it's not. It's so much bigger. It has so much life to it. So many parks in our city have gone through some major transformations. Could you give some examples of those transformations and how they began?
Well, I think a really great example is Clark Park. The Clark Park Coalition has been stewarding Clark Park. It's probably the oldest stewardship group in our coalition. I think they've been around since 1991. Anthony Benavides is their executive director, and he tells this story much better than I do, but I'll give it a shot. He says in the 1980s, the park was hit really hard by the crack epidemic, and a lot of people called it Crack Park.
Oh, no.
And over the years, neighbors really came around the park, took ownership of it. You'll see this story time and time again in the city. People were like, don't close our parks. We'll mow the grass. We'll do whatever we need to do. Just keep the parks open. Keep them here for our neighbors, for our community members as the assets that they should be. And a lot of love, a lot of volunteer time and effort went into Clark Park. And now today you can see after strategic neighborhood funding, the park is like totally transformed, beautiful, lively. It's busy, hockey rink, youth programming. There's everything there.
And we actually recently had Anthony on to talk a little bit about ice skating at Clark Park and that program. So it's really, really great to hear about the improvements at Clark Park. So what does a park system say about the city of Detroit, especially in the state that it's in right now? We're seeing it grow. We're seeing good things happening. What does it say about the city of Detroit?
I think caring about parks just shows that you care about people, that you care about quality of life, that you care. It's not just about keeping people alive and keeping people in a city, but that they're happy, that they have places to go, things to do, places to bring their families. So, and that we value being outside, being in nature, and also just talking to other people. meeting your neighbors, seeing the same people over and over again from your community out in the park. It's just so positive.
I was going to say, were you listening to Tanya Mosley talk about community, actually? Yeah, and she just talked about that. And that's such an important thing. I think that we've been hearing a lot about, Robin, on the Metro in general, this with our guests, is community.
Preserving community and what that looks like.
Exactly. You're listening to the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Sigal Hemy of the Detroit Parks Coalition about Detroit's parks and how they continue to grow and change. What are some of the biggest challenges, Sigal, facing our parks right now?
Well, we talked about having 300 parks in the city, so maintenance is always a challenge. The city has come a long way. So before bankruptcy of the 300 parks, I think the city was maintaining somewhere in the 40s of them. That's when we saw the rise of a lot of these stewardship groups. Today, the city's obviously come a very, very long way. They're not just maintaining the parks, they're investing in them, but it's still a lot. You have to have lawn crews. You have to have people wanting summer jobs. So definitely just mowing the grass, picking up the trash. These things make a really big difference to a park and how welcoming it feels, but keeping it going is a labor of love.
Is funding one of those challenges, would you say, in keeping the parks looking beautiful and thriving?
Funding, both in terms of how the city prioritizes putting tax dollars into the park and philanthropic dollars, yeah.
Now, one thing the Detroit Parks Coalition tries to do that is noteworthy, something that we talk about on the Metro a lot, it centers equity in its work. But I'm wondering, what does that look like when it comes to our parks?
We always think of equity as every park reflects its neighborhood. Every park reflects its community. And we try to really incorporate the visions and the voices of park users, who are often the residents closest to the park. The way we always work is through park stewardship organizations. So these are friends of organizations who work with a park, reflect the community, a lot of the neighbors who came together that we've been talking about over time. And we really believe in, if you're going to do something to a park, do it with those people who've been using it and advocating for it the whole time. So anytime we put programs in parks citywide, we always do it in partnership with park stewardship organizations, block clubs, churches, like, hey, what are you guys looking for? And when do you want it? When doesn't conflict with stuff that you already have going on? So that kind of stuff seems really basic, but it actually makes everything you do so much more inclusive, and then people end up using it, which is what you want.
So like Friends of Rouge Park would be an example of one of those groups?
Yes.
Okay. And those are people who are working hard to...
No, I know. I snapped and she laughed. I'm like, yes. You see the results. You see it.
You do. So all of our members in the Detroit Parks Coalition would be an example of a park stewardship group, like a Friends of Rouge Park, People for Palmer Park, Clark Park Coalition, Chandler Park Conservancy, Belle Isle Conservancy, all the way. These are more regional parks, like we talked about earlier, like Friends of Patton Park, Sidewalk Detroit for Eliza Howell Park. Even the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy and the Downtown Detroit Partnership, these are still organizations that steward their spaces on behalf of the park users. And then the Adopt a Park program also includes a lot of smaller, like block clubs, neighborhood organizations that play that same function with the neighborhood parks.
How can people get involved with the Adopt a Park program?
Great question. So the Adopt a Park program is a partnership between the city, the neighborhood groups, and the Detroit Parks Coalition. Basically gives people a chance to adopt, be like the formal representative of, with the city, a neighborhood or regional park. There's an application right now that's on the city's website and our website, DetroitParksCoalition.com, that basically just asks you, who are you, what's your history or intention with the park, and what would you like to do? And the Adopt a Park stewards are asked basically to connect the park with the people. So they do that through programming and cleanups. They're asked to host at least 2 events and at least 2 cleanups on a yearly basis. And they get a lot of support. So the city also will tell them, like, hey, if we're going to do an event in your park, we'll give you a heads up and you can tell your people. And then through the Detroit Parks Coalition, we'll do lunch and learns where we get everyone together and get them with the city, talk about their issues and their opportunities, We have a supplies library, so if you want to do a cleanup in your park, you can grab a trash bag or clippers and stuff, so you don't have to buy that from scratch. And we actually have grant opportunities for people, too, to put on their events and get people out in the parks and engaged.
Okay, so the Adopt a Park program needs you, our listener, to adopt a park and help be a steward to ensure the park's futures. And the last question for you, a rapid fire question, Sigal. Yes, tell us your favorite under the radar park in the city.
Ooh, under the radar park.
In the last 20 seconds we have here. Yep.
I think it depends where you live. So I live in Sherwood Forest, and I know Palmer Park is not under the radar, but it's my home park, and I always like to give it a shout out. But I think no matter where you live, get out somewhere that's not your community and see how different the park is. I think an East Side park like Chandler has such a different flavor than a West Side park like Rouge. If you've never been to Clark or Patton, it's like a whole different world. So just get out and try a new park.
Sigal Hemy is the executive director of the Detroit Parks Coalition. Sigal, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up at 11, there is a lot of money in politics. The current presidential team is only continuing that trend. President Trump's administration is made up of people who have a combined net worth of $328 billion, and those individuals want to run the government like a business. So next hour, we want to ask you, should we run government like a business? Give us a call, let us know. 313-577-1019.
This is the Metro on WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.